The Apple Valley Model Railroad Club presents Modeling Basics 101. This six-part series introduces you to the exciting world of model railroading, covering everything from initial layout design to final scenery. For more information about the Apple Valley Model Railroad Club, visit their website at avmrc.com. Part 1. Where do I begin?
I have built layouts in every scale in the course of my life, from N to G. I'm currently an S scaler. I love the size. That's one of the things I'm going to talk about. So I have some knowledge in each of the scales about design and building and so on. But I want to get you started on the right foot. I'm going to assume that you've never built a layout, and I'm going to talk to you about some things that you probably never thought of to consider. And I'm relying on the many, many, many mistakes I made over the years to help you to avoid making those same mistakes. Let's get started. Some of you in this room are married, some of you aren't. One of the first things I noticed when I came down here with this club is how many guys I found who built a layout, and either right after building it or a few years later, their spouse said, I want part of that room for my quilting project, or I want this, can you tear your layout down and build a smaller one, and so on and so forth. One of the key members of our club just went through that last year. He had a big, beautiful layout in his basement, and his wife decided she wanted part of the room, and he said, okay, but I got to tear my layout down. So he tore the whole thing down and built a new, smaller layout. So the first thing I would say to you is, if you have a spouse, or in your case, Caleb, parents, and you want to build a layout, make sure that everybody in the house is on board with what size you're going to do and where you're going to do it. Because the worst thing is to build the damn thing and have to tear it down because it's in the way, or you find out you got a traffic pattern through the room that's causing trouble. So consider everybody in the house and negotiate and make sure you have a solid agreement, because you're going to be putting a lot of time into building a layout. The last thing you want to do is get to the end and somebody says, you got to tear it down because I'm going to park my new Porsche there, So that's number one. It's best if you can build the layout in a climate-controlled room. In other words, not in the garage. You will be surprised, if you've never built a layout before, how much humidity or lack of humidity can cause problems on a layout. My layout is half of the basement of my house. It's a totally finished off room with a heat pump system and everything else. I mean, it's the ideal location for a layout. I have a problem in the winter keeping the humidity high enough. My bench work shrinks, and all of a sudden I've got a turnout where cars are derailing because the bench work shrank and the turnout got squeezed a little bit, and it's just a hair too tight between the rails. And this has happened to me half of the winters that I've had my layout, which I've had for 16 years. So even in the best of conditions, you can have problems. It's not so much in the summer, but it's in the winter if it's dry. So if you're going to have a decent sized layout, for God's sake, buy a humidifier and run it in the winter. I find that I got to keep my room above 40% humidity. As soon as I drop down in the 30s or the 20s, I have trouble. I got a lot of track work, and I have a problem. So that's something to consider. Yes?
Yeah, my extension is going to be on 2-inch foam with cork road bed. You have humidity problems with that kind of?
I don't know. I've never done it that way. Mine is on plywood on Homasote road bed.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know how foam core would react. I would suspect it would not shrink, so it might be a better alternative. I've never used it.
Okay.
Yeah, but anyway, make sure you have your room climate controlled, at least to some degree, because it can be a nasty issue. One of the finest layouts in the country is right here on the east side of town, Ron Hale. I mean, this guy's layout is to die for. I'm a yard master in his op sessions. I've been running this yard for years on his op sessions. The past 2 summers, I have been working his yard, and it calls for me to spot cars on track 4 in his yard. I back into track 4, I uncouple the cars, I pull out, and the cars roll right back out through the turnout. Only in the summer. Okay? So I'm not lying when I say this. Climate control, guys, it's really important. If you plan to have op sessions, and I assume that most of you guys, if you're starting out, you're going to be building a small layout, probably not having any op sessions. But if you do, it's best to have an area for your operators to be able to sit down between running trains and have a cup of coffee and that sort of thing. So if you have that option and you know you're going to do op sessions, think about having 4 or 5 or 6 guys over and how do you accommodate them while they're there? Because it's an operating session is as much a social event as it is an operating session. I mean, we go to these op sessions, we have a good time. And on certain layouts, there's a lot of sitting around and talking. Like Ron Hale's house is a good example. There's a lot of rather elderly fellows my age who are there, and they can run one train and then their back hurts. They got to sit down for a while. So if you're building a layout of size and you're going to have op sessions, just think about, okay, I'm going to have 4 guys come over. Where are they going to sit and have coffee between trains? I'm trying to cover the basics here, things that you might not have thought about when you're going to plan or design your layout. Probably most of you or all of you already know what scale you want to model in. But if you don't, things to consider. As you get older, the small trains like N scale get more and more difficult to work with. I have ceased going to an N scale layout where I'd been doing monthly op sessions because for the life of me, I can't uncouple the cars without knocking 3 of them off the track. I just can't do it. And I'm not shaky. I don't know what it is, but I stick that little pick in there and I twist it and 2 cars go plop like this. I can't read the numbers on the cars, so it says put car 1, 2, 3 in the siding. I look at it, okay. I can't read it. On the flip side, O scale, it's hard to build a layout big enough to have guys over for an operating session, to have enough work on the layout to keep everybody busy. So everything is a trade-off. And I'm not saying that one scale is any better than the other. I'm just saying think about the different situations you might be in and how you want to use your model railroad, I guess is the best way to say it. For me, I'm an op session guy. When I designed my layout, my #1 priority was this layout's got to be fun to operate. That took precedence over everything else. You might be the complete opposite. You might say, I want to build a beautiful scene and just stick some trains on it to give it animation. I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong. I'm just saying we all think of things differently. So consider all that when you're choosing the size if you haven't already. As I look around, I think everybody here's already picked the scale that they're going to model in. What do you want to accomplish with your railroad? If it's the first one you're building it because you just want to see if you can build a model railroad. How do I do it? What's involved? And I just want to build it to see if I can build a layout that looks great and it runs great. And that's fine. Or are you building it for operations? If you're building it for operations, you have to consider the human traffic pattern throughout your layout. Are guys going to be in each other's way as they're running their trains? Or can a guy reach that siding over there to uncouple his car? That sort of thing. So these are things you have to think about when you're designing your layout. How you want to use the layout, what you want the layout to be. Are you going to model a particular era or a particular part of the country? For me, I picked a railroad. I grew up on the outskirts of Reading, Pennsylvania. I watched Reading trains run every day for years. I modeled the Reading Railroad. And the era that I picked was the 60s, so I could run steam or diesel, but now I'm all diesel. But so you want to think about having a theme to your layout. It gives it a little more purpose and a little more fun if there's a theme, rather than just say, I'm just going to build a layout and I'm going to buy a red locomotive and a yellow locomotive and a black locomotive. You don't care what road they are or anything like that. But these are things to think about and plan. Are you going to model modern trains of this era now, where you're going to have long freight cars and long locomotives? Because now you got to think about curve radiuses in your track. If you make it too tight, you're going to have problems. I modeled the 1960s, so everything's pretty short. There's no issues. So these are things to consider in your design. What type of trains are you going to have long passenger cars on your layout, or is everything going to be relatively short? Any questions?
What would be a standard? Like what would be a standard radius turn, and what would be a standard length of a train?
Well, there's no standard of a length of a train as far as model railroading, I don't think. I mean, that does bring up an issue, and before I forget it, I'm going to mention it now. You might want to think about, do you want to run long trains or not? Because when you start designing your sidings to put cars on, how are you going to handle it if you have long trains? Do you have enough lead to get into the sidings and so on and so forth? But I don't know, does that answer your question? Yes?
The radius, Larry.
Oh, the radius, yeah, okay. You had a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask about the radius also.
Okay.
Chart for different
Well,
sizes, locals.
again, the radius is determined. First of all, there is a minimum radius for each of the scales. I'm not sure what it is. If you're going to run long passenger trains, for instance, you don't want tight radius curves, because the cars look really stupid going around a sharp curve with the center of the car 2 inches into the layout. So this is something to consider. Yes, Mike?
With an HO, you want a 24-inch minimum radius. When you get into O gauge, 36-inch minimum radius.
Okay.
And it depends, again, you're right, on the length of your cars.
Yeah.
If you're running long passenger cars, you want the minimum radius to be at least twice the length of your longest car.
Okay.
So
I never heard that formula before, but that's a good idea.
Radius.
Okay.
Yep.
I know that in N scale, if you have a number 6 turnout, that's a 19-inch radius. So I would say in N scale, you want to stay 18 to 19 inches as a minimum. HO, you said 24 inches. And I know in S scale, 30 inches is a good radius. I don't have any radiuses that tight on my layout. I went with 33 as a minimum. And it looks good, and the trains run well through that.
Those would be the minimum radii that you would use.
Yeah.
18, 24, 36. minimum radii.
Okay,
20 gauges.
thank you, that makes sense. And that's easy to remember, 18, 24, and 36, okay, as minimums. The other thing about curves is if you're really fussy about things, it's best not to go from a straight directly into a 36-inch radius. You want to taper into it gradually over the length of maybe a half or of a piece of flex track. Mark had come to me a couple weeks ago, and he was going to put together a little circle of track on a piece of plywood and have a siding. And he said, I want to put a switch there and have a siding. Well, his piece of plywood was about 2 feet by 2 feet, okay? And I laid that switch down and I said, if you come off of that switch, you can't get around this tight radius. And what was the radius of your curve? It was like a 12-inch radius. So it couldn't be done because you can't come off of a turnout at 12 inches. They don't make a turnout that's that sharp. So you have to look at the turnouts that you're going to use and take the radius coming off the turnout and consider that as you're leading into a curve. So if your turnout goes into a curve at a 19-inch radius and you want to get tighter, then you start your piece of flex track at 19 and taper it down as you bend it around. Okay, so these are just things to think about and consider when you're doing the drawing for your layout. Before you sit down with pencil and paper, find out what the radius is of the different turnouts. And on a main line, you don't really want to use a number 4 turnout. The number 4s are kind of for in yards and industrial sidings. They're sharp as far as a mainline operation of a train. But if you take a number 6 turnout and look at the radius of the curve on that turnout, that's a good guide to give you a radius for your track work. Build a layout as high as you're comfortable with. I don't think most guys sit down to design a layout and say to themselves, okay, I'm designing a layout, what if I have to crawl under it? You don't think about that. And then you build the layout, and the first thing that happens is in the far back corner, something comes off the track. The kind of accepted standard is to build somewhere between 42 and 48 inches. I start at 48 and go up on my layout. The other thing is you are going to be spending some amount of time under your layout for some reason. You got wiring you may have to do under there. You may have a track that goes into a tunnel that you can only get to from under the layout. You will be going under your layout unless it's a solid piece of plywood with nothing underneath. So consider that, especially as you get older. When I built my layout, it was no problem to zip under there and do something. Now something happens, I go, oh, crap. I wish there was somebody around here that could go back there and fix that. And the first derailment you have on your layout will be at the furthest most reach under the layout that it can possibly be. I built this big hidden staging yard under the layout to feed trains up on my layout. Big mistake. Tore it all out. Big mistake. Nothing but problems. It's hard to build something under an already existing layout, to get in there and do the work and get it all perfect and everything. Don't do it. I'm not saying don't build it after the layout. And test it well before you build stuff over top of it. Because you will have problems down there, I can guarantee it. It's just an unwritten rule in model railroading. How do you want to interact with your railroad? Are you somebody who likes switching, likes to get in there and interact with your railroad? Or you like a layout that I saw in South Carolina years ago. Guy had a 2-car garage, and the entire attic to the garage was a big HO layout. And he said, he had a bunch of guys over, and he said, okay guys, let's go see my layout. We walk up into his room, he walks over to the wall with a series of switches, he goes boom, 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 lights come on, trains start running, he goes over to an armchair and sits down and grabs a magazine. Trains are going all over the place, passing each other on sidings. He's sitting on the couch watching a football game. That's what he wanted in a model railroad. Okay, and that's fine. I'm the exact opposite. I want to be working and running my train the whole time, switching cars and moving stuff around. I love operations. So consider that when you design your layout, because you have to think about, what do I have to do to uncouple that car for that industry? It's pretty far away. Can I get in there and uncouple? If you can't reach it, don't build it that way. Redesign it somehow, okay? Unfortunately, because of the amount of track work I wanted to pack into my layout, I have a number of tunnels. Make sure that you have some way to get to those tunnels if a car comes off. I've got a couple of tunnels where I have to get a piece of carpeting and lay it over the track to my main reading yard and get up on it on my knees, kneeling on my track work to get something out of the tunnel. I had a flat car with an antique tractor on top of it as a load, and it was higher than anything I'd had on my layout. And the first time I ran it, it went in the tunnel and half the train came out. The top of the tractor snagged on the tunnel portal, and it was over there. And I'm going, how in the world am I going to reach this thing? Because I not only have to get to it, but I have to get my arm in the tunnel to get this thing and pull it out. It must have taken me 20 minutes to do it because it was so far away. And like I said, I had to lay something on the yard, get up on my knees. So think about these things when you design your layout. Is your design going to be fun to run once you've finished it and you build it? You design a layout, think about running it, operating it. Are you going to be content to have a circle with 1 or 2 sidings on it? After 5 laps around the layout, you kind of go, okay, what's next? And there is no next. There's nothing left to do. Okay, so consider that and think about it. Think ahead of time about how you want to, like I said, this fella down in South Carolina, he was content to throw a switch and watch football. I don't know how many of you are like that. I doubt that any of you are, but, and that's fine if that's what you like. But you want to think about interacting with your railroad. Mine is designed so that I can have a blast all by myself running my layout, or I can have a blast having 8 guys come over and running the layout, and I stand back and watch and learn from what they do and so on and so forth. But once it's finished, is it going to be fun? Is it still going to be fun to operate it, to mess around with it? And you can make a small layout interesting. I've done it. I'm a fan of switching layouts like this one that's propped on the wall back here. I've got a G-scale switching layout under a sunroom outside. It's 32 inches wide and it's 24 feet long. I got 1 locomotive and about 15 freight cars, and I have 9 industries on the layout. And I got a little stool on wheels. I can sit down and I can run this thing back and forth. And I have a 2-track yard, a departure and an arrival track. And I can pull cars out, put them in industries and come back. I can entertain myself out there by myself for hours in what's a rather small G-scale layout. You can do the same thing in N-scale on a table like this, or HO. I could build a very interesting layout on a table like this. Just things to think about when you're designing it is, what do I do when it's finished? Now, of course, there's a saying in the hobby, your railroad is never finished, but I mean finished in terms of the track work and so on. In the design, do you want to be able to run multiple trains, or you just want to run one train at a time? I'm assuming most of you starting out will be building a rather small layout, but that doesn't mean you're limited to running one train. It can be designed to run a couple. You can have a loop with a passing siding, and you can have one train sitting on the passing siding, the other one comes around, stops, this one takes off, goes the other way, or something like that. But just when you sit down to design it, just think about, what is this going to be like to run when I have it finished? Do you want grades on your layout? I've got a number in here of 2%. Would you agree with that, Mike?
Max.
Yeah.
Real railroads keep theirs under
Right.
2%.
Right,
Correct.
right.
Absolutely.
My grades on my layout are steep. They're steeper than they should be. I had to do it to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. It has not really been an issue. And I run some big trains. I run some 15-car trains. In S scale, I've got some heavy cars. I've got a flat car with a bulldozer on it. That thing's got to weigh 10, 12, 14 ounces. Okay, and I can haul them up the grades. But you're best to stick to 2% as a maximum for your grades. Yes?
Explain to them that, for those who don't know, that would be 2% would be about 2 inches over 8 feet.
Okay.
Rise, so
Okay.
clarify that.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Another thing, something I did wrong on my layout, I didn't check to see that my grade was consistent. I was eyeballing it. So my grade, rather than being like this, is kind of like this. I mean, I'm over exaggerating, but I recently had developed a problem with pulling long trains up the grade, and what I noticed was they'd get halfway up doing just fine, and then they'd really slow down for a while, and then they'd kind of take off, and then they'd slow down, and I realized that my grade was not consistent. So have a way to check that, whether you have I've got one of these levels that has a percent of grade. You can lay it on your track and see. In your design, what type of track plan do you have in mind? These are different options that you have, and they're kind of listed here in the order, with the one at the top being the least complex and the one at the bottom being the most complex. A loop just means a circle of track. You got a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and you got a train that does this. Excuse me. Okay. A figure eight, you know what a figure eight looks like. Gives it a little more interest. You got a crossing. L shape is basically a loop that you've stretched out, and then you put it in the corner of a room. And here's something to bring up. You got a room to build a layout. If you build a layout in the middle of the room on, let's say, a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and you're going to do switching and so on, you're going to be doing a lot of walking around the layout. Okay, walking around the layout. If you take that same sheet of plywood and rip it in half the long way and build a 2x16 foot layout, you're going to do less walking. It's just back and forth here, and you can put a lot of switching and operation into it. Okay, so think about that when you're designing your layout. A dog bone layout is another example where you can have a reversing loop at one end, another reversing loop, and then the tracks coming together in a dog bone. It can be a dog bone shaped into an L. That gives you a long run for your trains, and it gives you a lot of straight track that you can put sidings and industries off of. using the same amount of lumber as building a big platform in the middle of the room, where all you can, because you're limited in how sharp your turns can be, there's not a lot of switching and so on you can put in a loop layout, because the train's turning all the time and so on. So things to think about. How do you want to run your train? How do you want to run your layout? And what is going to make it interesting for you to operate? A point to loop layout. Basically, that's what I have. I used to have a loop to loop until I tore out this big staging yard. So now I have some tracks at one end of the layout with trains parked on them, ready to come onto the layout. They run through my entire layout, climb up over the fireplace, go into a big yard up there with a reversing loop at the end of it, and then they work their way all the way back down. So to take a train out of staging, run it through my layout, all the way up through the loop and all the way back down without stopping to do any switching can take about 45 minutes, running prototypical speed, like 30 miles an hour or so. Okay, so you can get a lot of operation doing that. And then at the end of the session, those trains that I ran into the end, I just back them out and I swap the locomotive and the caboose and back them back into the yard, and they're ready to run the next time. Does that make sense? Okay. Multi-level. Do you want to have different levels? Mine is multi-level. Now you're getting into grades. So you got to be conscious, do I have enough space to get from level 1 to level 2 without exceeding that 2% grade? Think about that when you're designing it. Hidden staging. That's what I tore out. It's okay to use it. I'm not saying it's bad. Make sure if you do build a hidden staging yard that you have easy access to it. If you have to get in there and change a car or do something, pick up the locomotive because you want to clean the wheels or something like that, make sure you have access to that hidden staging. All right, my hidden staging was under the layout. I have a design I'm going to show you here in a couple of minutes where the hidden staging is in another room. It's going to cut a hole in the wall and go into another room and park trains in there to run out onto the layout. Okay?
Larry, I have a question.
Yes.
If you go to a second level, what is the minimum height of that?
All depends on the wall.
Minimum.
Like how tall are your freight cars or whatever? So is
Clearance,
there
how much
a clearance? Yes, thank you.
Clearances. Well, you wouldn't have two levels of layout that close together. You know, because you don't want to have to reach in like this under the upper level to do something. I'm talking about separating something by at least a foot, even in N scale, right, Mike?
Yeah, but that also then feeds back to your rise. You know, don't forget that for every inch that you have of separation, that's another degree of rise that you have to separate the layout, and that's another degree of rise that the cars have to go. So for every degree of rise, that's another 4 foot of run that you have to have. So to separate your layout, even 2 inches, that's another 8 foot of length of track that you have to have. So to separate, for instance, to separate another 4 inches, you need another 16 foot of trackage. So for every 2% of grade that you have to have another 8 foot of track. So to separate, to get the 1 foot of difference that you have, think about how many foot of track you have to have.
Yeah.
So, you know, your clearance has to be calculated into your track, so that to have that clearance that you're talking about, Tom, you know, to get, you know, your clearance that you want in there, you have to have substantial length of track.
Yeah.
To get that clearance, to keep that 2% rise.
Yeah, you really do. On my layout, I have a town that's at 52 inches elevation. And above it and over my head is a big staging yard for my coal mines. When I designed this whole thing, my guidance was the staging yard has to be here. Okay, now what is that? I'm 6'3", let's make it 6'4". Okay, so I had to climb from 52 inches to 6'4". All right, but around the back of the room and climb up. Okay, so think about where it is relative to human traffic, and does it have to clear something? But you don't want your two levels close together. I mean, that wouldn't even look right. Plus, how do you get in there? You know, it just wouldn't look right. You want to separate it.
But for every inch of separation is another 4 foot of track.
Yes, yeah.
Right, and
And that's
when you're
length
saying
of track.
separation, it may be like a helix or a long slope
Yes.
incline in an S turn to
Yes.
get yourself up to where you're gonna eventually be at the top.
Right.
And then at that point, you can have whatever kind of industry or scenery or whatever. And then the thought will be whatever you do on the front end, you have to do on the back end to
Yeah.
get back down to
Yeah.
that. Okay.
For mine, my town at the bottom is here. The train goes around a bend, goes all the way around the room, and comes out up here. So it's traveling probably 40 feet to get up here. And when you're here, you don't see this. And to run this, there's a platform behind me with 3 steps. You go up on the platform, you're up there, you don't see the layout that's down here. You're in 2 separate worlds, but you're standing next to each other.
But you're gaining elevation all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, elevations, it's important to get them right, but the rule of 2%, a consistent grade, and you also, when you go into the grade and out of the grade, don't make it, don't put 2 pieces of track together like this. Don't say I'm level, now I'm on the grade. You got to taper it. So it's best where the curve occurs, where you start to taper it, is make that a length of your flex track. Don't have a joint in there. I had a turnout that one side was the main line that was going to start up the grade, and the other one went into an industrial complex. So I came off of that turnout with a big length of track, and I kept it level for about 6 inches, and then I started to grade. And by the end of it, I had the angle, the 2% angle, okay? You don't want any kinks of any kind, whether they be vertical or lateral in your track work. Every 2 pieces of rail should come together exactly like that. None of this and none of that.
The general rule is a 0.5% vertical rise, Larry. on
Okay. Do I have any, oh, okay.
Yeah, so you can't go wrong if you use the Rinks Lifelike or somebody makes that foam 2% rising kit, which I plan to use.
I'm not familiar with it. I don't know how to answer you.
Basically 2%, so I would assume if you use all the way to your top, you should be okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, Western Scenic makes rises.
okay.
Yeah,
You know,
the continuous.
1 inch, 2 inch, or 3 inch.
All right,
It's a
okay.
continuous, if you stretch it out, it's 12 feet long. And that takes you from 0 to 3 inches in HO scale.
Okay,
So I'm coming down from like 2 3/4 because I've got an extent railroad that was 4% grade. When
Okay.
I didn't know what I was doing.
4%?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I've got 3 engines that'll go up, the other ones won't.
You better be running real short trains.
17, one engine, well, I've got a double engine that'll pull up the grade. And believe it or not, I've got an American Flyer Gilbert switching engine that goes up that grade with 12 cars.
Okay,
But anyway, I'm tearing out one side of the 4%, change it to 2%. I'm going to go up that side and down the other. So
okay. If you have the buildings, or you know what building you're going to put there, you can, every building, they give you the dimensions of the finished product. So if they tell you that this building is going to be 18 inches long and 6 inches wide, and it's going to be back against the wall, you know that you need 6 inches for the building, and then you need a gap to the tracks. And what you can do there is just take anything, lay a piece of track down, and put a piece of paper or cardboard there, and then put a car on the track and see how close can I get the building to that car. I have a box car. I just take a box car and I run it down there to make sure I have enough clearance.
Okay.
There's no prescription, so to speak.
Okay.
But you just want to take a piece of cardboard or one of the walls of the building, set your car on it, say, okay, let me put it out here. Well, that's not realistic because a guy can't step from the car over to the building. Let me bring it closer. Well, how close can you bring it? And you want to leave, and your siding should be straight wherever they're going into a building. Don't have a building on a curve. Okay, if you have to curve, do the curve, and then on the straight, put your building. But leave yourself a gap because some cars lean. I got a box car I've tried 3 times to fix it. It always wants to lean a little bit. So that's a good guideline. Put that in and leave an 1/8 of an inch or so gap.
Okay.
All right.
Larry, if you use the railroad right-of-way, the railroad right-of-way is generally 14 foot from the outside rail. So if you use a HO gauge scale rule, and you keep your buildings a minimum 14 foot away from the outside rail, set your buildings 14 foot away from the outside rail minimum.
There's a lot of trade-offs
Yeah.
when you're building a layout. As I say, there are guidelines, but there's a lot of times where the guideline just isn't going to work, and you have to figure out how can I cheat but make it look convincing, make it look right, and not cause a problem on running the railroad. So yeah.
Like, how do you know what size a backdrop's going to come out if you want to custom make one, like from the internet or something? How do you know what size?
That's a good question, and I don't know how to answer it. What he's asking is, how do you know what size to make a backdrop? I don't know if there's a guideline for that. I mean, with each scale, as the scale gets bigger, you want your backdrop bigger.
What I mean is, like, what if you want the backdrop a certain size, but how do you know if you're getting it off the internet? How do you know what size is going to come out? How do you make it the size you want it to be?
Oh, you're talking about buying a pre-printed backdrop.
Yeah, I'm printing it out yourself, basically. Not buying it, taking a picture off the internet and printing it out yourself.
Go ahead if you have a.
Yeah, I've got a professional printer, so I can tell you that once you transfer it to your printing module, you can make it any size you want. So that's trial and error. I mean, you have to know depth of field and what it looks like, and it's pretty much a trial and error thing. What you have to do is cut the photo into pieces. Because my printer will print up to 13 by 19. I can print a sheet of paper this big. So I could print a whole bunch, and it would be 13 inches high, which is nice for a backdrop. But you've got to know the depth of field. You have to know what it's supposed to look like. And you have to just waste some paper.
And scale, you have to scale everything to where it looks.
Exactly.
I know what you're asking is, how do you scale things, like how do you scale a car
And it's
to
only-
look like the scale of your.
Exactly. Like something up close.
The printer module's not going to give you that.
No.
Yeah.
You're going to have to just scale it, print it, do a test piece, and take a look.
All right.
And you have to seam it because now you got to take your photograph or whatever they gave you and cut it in 3 pieces because you can't print it all at once, unless you go to a professional printer, in which case they will print it for you. It's going to cost you some money. So, yeah.
What I did on my layout for the backdrop is I used masonite just fastened to the walls, and I ran it all the way to the ceiling. I pre-painted it blue, and I made it a lighter blue at the bottom and gradually made it darker as it goes up, because that's what you see if you look at the real world. And then all of my buildings that are on the backdrop are not painted onto the backdrop. They're either pictures that are pasted on there, or the face of a building. You know, take a kit, take the front wall and paste it to the backdrop, offset it a little bit to give it some depth. And then I just took a sponge and did the clouds. And when you do clouds, I'm very proud of the way the clouds look on my layout, but I just took a sponge that had a lot of big holes, you know, not a little fine one, and just dabbed it in the paint and then dabbed it on a piece of paper to get chunks of paint out of it. And then I just make the cloud like this in white. Then I would take I'd add a little bit of gray and go across the middle of the cloud, and then a little more gray, and make it darker at the bottom. Because you look at clouds, they always look dark on the bottom and white at top. And it comes out fantastic. I can show you pictures on here. And it's really easy to do. And, you know, doesn't really cost you anything. So, and that way, you know, I just ran this all the way out. I wanted the whole thing to look like the real world. So, inexpensive and easy to do. If you want to do CAD design, let the computer do the actual drawing. These are 4 good websites to go to. I used CAD Rail for mine, and that way you don't have to struggle with a compass and figuring out radiuses and do I have it right. You know, you can put the information in there and it'll print it out correctly. I'm going to give everybody a copy of this, so you don't need to write it down. But these are good websites for track planning, and I haven't tried all of them. That X-Track CAD was recommended by 3 different people. I haven't looked at it myself, but they work well. And there's the bottom there. Don't forget, you're in this club. You got a lot of expertise in this building. If you got questions and you're struggling with something, come in here and ask around. I mean, if you ask me and I can't answer you, I'll say, you know who you got to talk to is Harry over there in the corner. He's really good at that. Or talk to so-and-so. All right? Bring your questions in here. It's cheaper to come in here and get good advice than it is to do it and find out you did it wrong and you got to tear it out and start over.
Several CAD or computer-aided design programs were mentioned during the presentation. X-Track CAD is a free, open-source program available on the SourceForge.net website. AnyRail has a demo available, but you will need to purchase a $65 license to unlock all its features. Its website is anyrail.com. Third Planet does not offer a demo and may be one of the most expensive options on the market at $124.95. It can be found by visiting the company's website at eldoradosoft.com. CAD Rail is also available as a limited demo. A fully functional version of the software will cost $99.95 at their website, sandiasoftware.com. For more information about the Apple Valley Model Railroad Club, visit their website at avmrc.com.